Hey there, welcome to First Look, the last one of 2025 or the first one of 2026, depending on when you're seeing this. But I'm recording it in 2025. And so Happy New Year or almost New Year or wherever you're at whenever you're seeing this. It's been a pretty interesting and, well, just fascinating year. And so I'm sorry to see it go in some ways. I'm glad to see it go in other ways. And my imagine is that you're kind of in a similar boat. I always try to take every new year with a sense of optimism, and I think like most of us. So I will do the same this year. Okay, so we're past Christmas, and we're rounding the bend towards the end of the Christmas season. As you all know, what we've been doing up until Christmas is Advent. And so when we get to Christmas Day, we start a new season until Epiphany, which is why there's 12 days of Christmas. Okay. So Epiphany is kind of on the horizon, and we'll be celebrating that this Sunday, the 4th. So I think when we finally get to Epiphany, I think we're in a place where we are collectively over it. And when I say over it, I mean we've done the Christmas thing. Like December has come and gone, and we are drained. I mean, we're just it's because it is. It's as wonderful and interesting and everything that it is. Christmas is also just a lot of things, and one of those things is a lot of energy. And so to have that be something that is now in the rear view, I think, is a welcome sight to many. But then you turn around after that experience and you realize that what's staring you down is January and February. So maybe for some of you, you keep your tree up a little bit longer just to kind of keep some of that alive. But regardless of how you do this transition, Epiphany is one of those things that I think is special to many of us for a couple of different reasons. The first is the story itself. And the second, if depending on whether you have been sort of with us for a while or not, is that we started the tradition, which is not my tradition, but is something that happens and people do in lots of traditions, not just Presbyterian, but in lots of different places around the world and different churches, different types of churches, is something called Star Words. Star Words, W-O-R-D-S. And so what will happen this Sunday is that at the end of the service, as you leave, you'll be presented with a word. It's not one that you choose in particular because of what it is, but you kind of pull it out of a hat. And the reason for a star word is it gives you kind of something positive, thoughtful, hopeful, maybe challenging to think about throughout the year. So you might pull out the word grace, or you might pull out the word intelligence, or you might pull out the word creativity or something. And it's on a little card that has a star, and in the middle of the star is the word. I happen to put mine near the dryer. And I put it there because I am near the dryer every day, many times a day, seems like. And so it's just one of my words is passion. So passion is up there near the dryer. And so I try to think about that, how I explore passion in my life. So if you are able to join us on Sunday, then you'll get one in person. If you would like us to save you one so you can get it whenever you're there the next time, great. If you want us to mail you one, if you want me to pull one out of a hat and take a picture of it and send it to you, I'll do that. That's perfectly fine. But we've been doing it now for maybe like 4 or 5 years, I think. And like I said, there is a range of churches of all types for a long time that have been doing this. So you're in good company. But the story itself, the Epiphany story, is what we're going to be focusing on here today. And so this is in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. So I think this is one of those stories that's challenging, because you kind of know how it's going to go. You know it well. You know, we've seen the Magi, the wise men, forever. So this is one of those opportunities to explore something that maybe you've already, worked through in your heart and mind, but maybe you get to do so from a different angle. So we'll see where it goes. All right. So again, this is Matthew chapter 2, starting in verse 1. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born the King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. And they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. And then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I also may go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. If you remember this past week, if you were with us in worship in any way, shape, or form, you know that what I was preaching on were the verses that come after that, the slaughtering of the innocents. And so this happens as a precursor to that. And I think that one of the things that I am always fascinated by when it comes to this text is people's reaction. Not our reaction, but the people in the story, their reaction. And I think one of the things that I am always kind of taken aback by is the fact that the wise men come and they say what they do, that this is supposed to have happened. And it says that Herod was afraid. Now that makes sense. Herod, for whatever we think of Herod, or for whatever Herod is also not a stupid person or an ignorant person. This is someone who would have known his history, would have known that kings can be dethroned, especially if the people who support the one who might come after are very passionate, very inspired. You think about what happened with David, for instance, replacing Saul eventually. Well, Herod, after hearing this news and after building as many things as he literally had built, could have felt like everything that he had built was being threatened, at least in terms of legacy. Because, of course, this child was just being born, and nothing was going to happen in his lifetime. But he knew that in his son's lifetime there would be something. So he sought to put an end to this. So his fear, at least on a very practical level, makes sense to me. It's the fear of Jerusalem, that little piece, and all that it says that all of Jerusalem with him was afraid. That's the part that I always find really fascinating. Because were they afraid because of the raw information that they were hearing from, or hearing secondhand, what we assume, from the wise men? That the information, just the news, was frightening. Because even if they knew that Herod was not a good person, they were settled into what Israel was. You know, they were comfortable with what was going on, in the sense that they had gotten used to settling for whatever this was. And so a new king could, or someone who wanted to be the king, could overthrow all of that. Because as you've heard me say many, many times before, one of the things that was true at the time was that Israel had this very delicate balance of their own way of life, of ruling themselves, but then of course also being under the umbrella of the Roman Empire. And that was a new type of difficulty. They had, of course, been slaves before. They had in another land. They, of course, had to fight for the land that they were in. They, of course, had gone into exile and returned, and all of that had been threatened since their return. But now they were occupied. They were still in the land, but they were held kind of captive, allowed to live, but not with any kind of freedom. And so that would have felt precarious. We want to keep our religion. We want to keep acting the way that we want, and experiencing our culture in the way that we want. But no, of course we don't like Rome. Of course that's true. So it was difficult, I think, to try to figure that out, to know what to think or what to feel. And I don't know what to liken that to, but maybe you don't really need an example. Any kind of occupying nation that controls the fate of others, even if there's this sort of handshake agreement of them being allowed to be who they are, all it takes is that bigger power to, not like the smaller one, and things go awry. And we've seen that in lots of different time periods, contexts, etc. This was not different. So there could have been fear because that was true. There also could have been fear, I suppose, because Herod made them afraid in kind of a propaganda-ish way. That you have something to fear here. You have something to go against. You have something to recognize might be a threat to you. I don't know. But it does make sense when you think about the fact that there was no, as far as I know, no great uprising, because right afterwards, all of these young people, these children, babies were killed, trying to find Jesus. That there was no uproar other than those who had lost. No record, no anything. Maybe they thought, well, that was a necessary act to keep us all safe for the greater good. I don't know. I've never really heard anybody's educated opinion on that, so I guess I'll offer an educated guess, or uneducated guess. So that's where the tension lies. Us knowing what is true, us knowing who Jesus was, and the tension of the fear that having this new king could have brought. And it's also, of course, then fascinating when you think about who Jesus would become, who the disciples hoped he might be, who he actually ended up being. When he said kingdom of God or kingdom of heaven, what he really meant, when he was trying to explain along the way. So it's a larger kind of swirling, complicated, religious, political, geographic, the whole thing. Then, of course, you come finally to the experience of the wise men themselves. And this is what I imagine that I'll spend time with in the sermon, is them traveling as far as they did. And any kind of travel over a long distance was inevitably dangerous for lots of different reasons. Falling victim to, robbers, or falling victim to the elements or animals, or, whatever. There was all of that. So it was the experience of the wise men who, I would imagine, were putting down a lot to see this out. I don't know what they had to sacrifice. I don't know who they had to say goodbye to. I don't know what they had to say goodbye to. I don't know if they were on their own, like other people thought this was not wise, and so they didn't go with them. There weren't 1,000 magi. There were 3. Is that because they went as representatives, or is that because they couldn't get anyone else to believe that this was what was happening? So, I start to think about the experience of the wise men. And I wonder, naturally, could I have done the same? But then you the part that you never hear, obviously, and to go too far with this would just be poetic license speculation, but they leave and they go home. They travel by another road. And then what happens? I have absolutely no idea. And neither do you, and neither does anyone else. Because then you wonder, what changed because that was true? What was better because that was true? Because what happens after they were there is a disaster for everybody. And so you wonder, this kind of quaint moment that we think of, with gifts and that kind of thing. Where are they in the aftermath of that? I don't know. And I think anytime we talk about the experience of faith, the experience of reaching beyond our norm, that can be a fearful thing. If Jerusalem was scared, we can often be too when it comes to how we experience and how we express our faith. And I think Epiphany is one of those times, it's really wonderful the way it lines up with the New Year and Epiphany, how that kind of works. And how it kind of gives us this interesting moment to take stock and to reflect and to hope for what's next. And it gives us this moment to to maybe be bold in something. And I think that the steps I have taken in my own faith, and some of them have been personal leaps, what I think or what I say or what I believe or what I start to kind of really dig into. Some of them have been professional leaps. deciding to go to seminary or whatever. That all those things, they haven't all had the same impact. Like they haven't all been as big as I thought they would be. But I don't regret any of them. So an example. A couple of churches ago, the church I worked with had a very close relationship with this veterans group. And the veterans group was sort of like a smaller regional Habitat for Humanity specifically for veterans. So they would go into, someone would apply, hey, my steps are broken, or my wall is, there was some whatever it is, some home problem. And this group would go in with volunteers and fix the thing for the veterans. It was a really, really great group. And I really respected their work and the reason for their work and the compassion they had for it and the way that they rallied the community and all of those things. It was really a positive thing. And one of the things that I tried to do with this group for like a year, maybe longer, was establish a kind of a step-up housing for people, for homeless veterans, as a kind of a bridge from housing insecurity or homelessness into their own independent living. And we worked on that and studied it and talked. I mean, like we did a lot of research and we talked to different funding groups and grant writing, just all sorts of things. We worked on it for a while. We found a location. We found someone who wanted to donate an old building. It was I can't even remember what it was now. But it never came to be. We had really high hopes for it. This director and I were having lunch and talking about it, and he said, I want you to get your head around the idea that a year from now this is going to be true. And I started to really lean into it and really think about it. And it didn't. Now, we did end up doing some good positive things came out of it. Another property came open and we were able to get one person into that property and then that person, eventually got into, some positive things came out of it. But I learned a lot along the way, and I know that we tried. We really earnestly, we put a lot of effort into it. And that group is still going and still doing really positive things in that community. But that particular thing that we hoped and dreamed for just didn't come to pass. And, I think, boy, that feels like maybe I should have put my efforts in some other direction. Maybe I missed the mark, and maybe I did. But I feel okay about that. I feel okay about spending time with a holy pursuit, even if it doesn't come to pass. Because I did learn something, and I hope that the people around me who also saw it and who also were working on it, even though they didn't see it come to pass either, that maybe it inspired something else. You never know where that kind of thing goes. But I don't regret that. I don't regret the year or two or whatever it was I spent trying to work on that. Because I think I'm better for it, and I hope that other people were too. And I think that's one of the things that I think about whenever we get to Epiphany is, how could we be changed? And even if we aren't as much as we think we will be, even if the work that we do doesn't have the revelatory kind of pivot that we're hoping that it will mean for our church or our community or our family or whatever, I don't regret the pursuit. because I think the pursuit is faithful. And I think that it inspires other things. So I hope that you find something in this coming year to aspire for. And even if you fail miserably, that it inspires something else. So let's try to risk something together and see what happens. So I thank you for doing that with me. I thank you for thinking about what 2026 can mean for you, for us, for the church. And there's some things that we're going to be celebrating here soon. And one of them is that on January 17th, we're having a potluck as kind of an end of our 100th anniversary celebration, and then a worship service on the 18th, which will wrap all of that up. So we're excited about that. So come and join us for those things if you can. Okay. Thank you for doing this with me. Again, Happy New Year. I hope that this coming year fills you with all the joy that you deserve. And I thank you for having this, coming along with us in this journey. And I'll see you next time for another First Look. So until then, take care.